Welcome to MacNeil Tech, the wash experience. My name is Scott Ferry and I work for Budco, a distributor of MacNeil wash systems. Today we're going to talk about top brush shaft and bearing replacement. This is considered a difficult repair that may require a lot of time and has potential for complications. This is something that should be done when you have plenty of time to execute the repair, and it will require a helper. When working on any equipment, understand all the hazards associated with the task. Before starting any work, lock out and tag out the equipment. Take all necessary safety precautions, including personal protective gear, which includes but is not limited to safety glasses, gloves, and footwear. In order to perform this repair, we need to bring the brush down to a manageable position, someplace that we can service it easily. And we can do that by simply overriding the solenoid by taking this red switch and turning it a quarter turn. And that'll bring the brush down to where we can service it. And then at that point we can put a safety strap on. So now that we've got this in the down position by overriding the solenoid, we're going to put a safety strap on here. As we remove the motor and remove the brush core and different parts from the top brush, this is going to lighten up and the counterweights are going to overcome the pressure of the cylinder that's bringing it to the down position. So the safety strap is there to hold it so that it stays where we need it while we're doing the repair, and is also for safety purposes. So I've already attached it to the brush shaft framework here, but we happen to have a wheel boss down here, and I'm going to use that as our anchor point. So I'm going to bring that nice and tight. I'm going to ratchet this into position. So that's nice and sturdy, and that's going to hold it in position for us while we do the repair. So with the safety strap in place, we can remove the motor from the shaft of the top brush. Now we've already gone ahead and disconnected the electrical. Now it's really important when you disconnect electrical from the box that you take a picture of it or label it in some fashion so that you can put it back together exactly the same way it came apart. So next we got to remove our cap off of the gearbox. And then we're going to remove the retaining bushing from the gearbox. And then just set that aside. Now right here we have what are called flex bushings that are behind these retaining, or these torque washers or torque bushings. So we're going to remove this. Okay, with this removed, now we can pull the motor from the shaft and remove the torque plate from the flex bushings. Now we're just going to set that aside. So next we're going to remove the end cap from the foam so that we can remove the hub from the shaft. And so we do that just by taking these short screws out right here. And next we're going to remove this. Now this is a long bolt. This is a compression bolt, so it's about 6 inches long. So we're just going to use this handy impact to remove that screw quickly. And then we just kind of pop this plate out, and that exposes our hub in there. So you can see in there that we have the 3-bolt flange that holds the hub to the brush shaft. And so those 3 bolts need to be loosened and removed so that the brush can be taken off. You need about 48 inches of socket extensions to be able to get in there to loosen that. But once you do, you get in there, loosen it, and then you're ready to remove the hub. So we've removed the hub, or the core of the brush from the shaft. Now that's a 2-person job to do that, but we've removed it and set it out of the way. Now we need to remove this 3-bolt flange. So we've already kind of bent back the cotter pin, and so we're just going to go ahead and remove that cotter pin. And now the really difficult part here is removing the castle nut. So we've taken and put a bolt in here that we can use a little prying bar to give us some leverage. And then we're going to just go ahead and remove that. So what we've done is we've removed the 3-bolt flange using the gear puller, and now we've taken and protected the end of the shaft on the motor side, and we've taken a sledgehammer and we've pounded it out. So this shaft, so this is the bearing and it comes out like this. But once we get to this point right here, you can see that there's a little bit of a lip on the shaft. And so by using the hammer and protecting the shaft, we can use that to pound this bearing out of the seat on the framework here. And so once we've done this, we're going to remove this shaft and then use the shaft itself to remove the other bearing. Okay, so now that we've got the bearings have been removed, and so we've taken some time and cleaned up the bearing seats, removed the old grease, made sure that there's no metal burrs or anything that would possibly hang it up. Now these are the bearings right here. So as you notice, there's 2 different size bearings for the top brush shaft. The smaller one goes in the motor side and the larger one goes in the brush side. The other thing to point out is the way that the grease is applied is it goes through a grease zerk and it comes into this channel. And this channel that's cut in the bearing has a hole that goes into the bearing core. And so that's kind of how the pathway of the grease. So we're going to go ahead and put this bearing in. And also notice that we've pre-applied some anti-seize to the shaft where the bearing sits. So we're going to go ahead and put that in, and then we're going to start just very gently tapping the bearing into place. So now that we've got the bearings reseated into the framework, we've taken and put a thin film of anti-seize around the place that the 3-bolt flange goes and the castle nut. So we're going to go ahead and put the flange back on and put it in place. And then we've got our washer. Now here's one important thing here. We have a shim that comes with the replacement bearing, and this is important because as it's tightening down, you have to be able to line the castle nut up with the hole that's machined through the shaft to put the cotter pin in. So we put that shim in just to allow us a little bit more space to tighten. And we're going to put that, put the castle nut on. And now we're going to make sure that that lines up, and so we got to tighten that down a little bit so that we can expose that hole for the cotter pin. So now we need our wrench and pry bar. And so again, just like when we took it off, we're going to put a screw in here just to give us a place for leverage. Okay, and then we're going to just take this and tighten it down until we expose the hole for the cotter pin. But we're going to take that cotter pin and just going to put it back down through there. And then we'll go ahead and bend this back into position and continue our reassembly. So now that we put the brush side bearing in, we're going to put the motor side bearing in. And again, we've painted the shaft with some anti-seize. So we're just going to go ahead and put this in. Now it's important to note that when you're pounding these bearings in, or when you're using the shaft to drive the bearings out, make sure that you're using a wooden block or a brass hammer or a dead blow hammer so that you don't mar the shaft or you don't cause problems with the equipment. So we're going to go ahead and pound that in. So now that we've got the bearings in both sides seated and into position, and we've also adjusted the shaft so that this collar that's machined on the shaft is roughly flush with the bearing on the motor side. But we need to tighten the set screws on both bearings on the motor side and on the brush side. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we've put the hub and we've put the 3-bolt flange back on, and now we put the hub back on the 3-bolt flange. Now at this point it's really useful to have a helper, because as you feed the bolt in, you need to have somebody holding the shaft so that you can rotate it to line it up, and it's fairly visible in there. But again, we need to have a long extension to get in there, And we're going to put this in, get it lined up, and then we're just going to go ahead and tighten this all up. Now, we already have 2 bolts in there, but they aren't tightened down completely because we want to be able to get everything cinched up before we tighten one down completely. But now that we've got the 3 of them started, we'll go ahead and tighten it all up and then come back to replace the cap. So now we've just got to replace the cap on the end of the foam. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the foam has expanded as we've done our repair today. So we have to put the cap in, and this is going to compress the foam all the way to the hub. But in order to do this, we have to have this screw hole right here lined up with this hole on the cap. And in order to do that, once we get the tight enough to where it's going to start compressing, it's going to be really difficult to rotate it to get that to line up. So I've got this small screwdriver I'm going to use once I get it pretty tight in there. So I'm going to just rotate this to where I can have that lined up. So now I got that lined up, and I can go ahead and compress the foam. Okay. And I can put these in. And lock that cap back down. So now we're going to put the motor back on. So we're going to do that. It's the motor's a little bit out of position, but once we get it on the shaft, we'll rotate it. So with the motor on the shaft, we're just going to replace the torque plate bushings over the torque washers. Then we need to take the keeper bushing, well, better known as the retaining bushing, and put that in there and tighten it down. Okay, with that in place, we can replace the gearbox cap. And with that tightened down, we can actually just go ahead and remove our strap. So the motor's back on, we've got our retaining bushing locked in, and we've got our plate reattached over the gearbox. We've also gone ahead and reattached the electrical connections. Now, we referenced the photo because before we tore anything apart, we took a picture of the wiring so we knew that we could get the wiring back exactly how it was before. Then also, before we release the strap and undo the override on the air, we want to grease the bearings. And so when we grease that, we just put some grease in and slowly rotate the brush by hand to make sure we get kind of an even greasing through that new bearing. And so then I'm going to go ahead and release the strap. And now that the strap is released, we can go ahead and turn off our override. Now that the repair is complete, we're going to turn the override off on the solenoid by just putting that back to its home position. And then we'll remove our lockout tag out, test the brush, and be ready for operation. Once the work is complete and the conditions deemed safe, the lockout tag out can be removed. So the last and most important thing to do with this repair is to make sure that the rotation of the brush is correct. So we restored power to the motor, we turned it on, and we're testing it, and we just need to make sure that it's rotating the right direction, make sure everything is smooth, make sure it's operating correctly, and then we're good to go and good to wash cars. Thank you for joining us at MacNeil Tech, the Wash Experience.